Why politicians often resort to labeling and blaming each other? This is a question that has puzzled many political enthusiasts and casual observers alike. In the world of politics, the game of labeling and blaming is as old as the hills. It's a strategy employed by politicians to either discredit their opponents or to rally their base. And it's not just a simple game of name-calling. It's a complex dance of influence and persuasion, designed to shape public perception and discourse. At the heart of this game is the power of words. Words that can evoke strong emotions and create vivid images in the minds of the public. Politicians know this power all too well, and they wield it with precision. They label their opponents with words that carry negative connotations, hoping to associate them with undesirable traits or views. For instance, terms like science denier, xenophobic, or heartless are used to paint their opponents in a negative light. On the flip side, they blame their opponents for perceived failures or problems. This is often done to deflect attention from their own shortcomings or to create a sense of urgency around their proposed solutions. Accusations of being anti-business, soft on security, or anti-Second Amendment are thrown around to stir up fear and doubt. But why do politicians resort to such tactics? The answer lies in the competitive nature of politics. In the race to win hearts and minds, politicians often feel the need to simplify complex issues into digestible sound bites. They use labels and blame to create a clear divide between us and them, making it easier for the public to pick a side. However, while these tactics may be effective in the short term, they tend to polarize public opinion and hamper constructive dialogue. They create an environment where compromise becomes a sign of weakness and where the focus shifts from solving problems to winning arguments. Let's dive into how Democrats and Republicans use these tactics against each other. Climate change and immigration, two hot topics that often lead to labeling and blaming. Let's dive into the turbulent waters of climate change first. When someone criticizes climate change policies, they might find themselves dodging labels from both sides of the political spectrum. Democrats may quickly brand you as a science denier, implying a refusal to accept the overwhelming scientific consensus on the issue. Meanwhile, Republicans might accuse you of being anti-business, suggesting that you're willing to stifle economic growth and innovation in the name of environmental protection. The climate change debate is a complex one, involving a delicate balance between environmental preservation and economic progress. But in the labeling and blaming game, the nuances often get lost, and people are reduced to simplistic caricatures. Next, let's navigate the contentious landscape of immigration policies. Here too, expressing concerns can result in a barrage of labels. Democrats might label you as xenophobic, implying a fear or dislike of people from other countries. On the other hand, Republicans could accuse you of being soft on security, suggesting that you're neglecting the country's safety by advocating for more open immigration policies. The immigration debate is about finding the right balance between welcoming newcomers who can enrich our society in countless ways and ensuring national security. But in the political arena, it's easy for this nuanced conversation to devolve into a labeling and blaming match. In both of these debates, it's crucial to remember that most people are not simply for or against climate change policies or immigration. They have specific concerns, ideas, and solutions. But in the heat of the political battle, these subtleties often get lost, and people are categorized into simplistic, one-dimensional labels. The art of politics should be about finding common ground and working towards solutions. But too often, it devolves into a labeling and blaming game that does little to advance the conversation or solve the issues at hand. As you can see, these topics are ripe for the labeling and blaming game. Now let's move on to healthcare and gun control. The landscape of American politics is dotted with divisive issues, and healthcare reform is one such terrain. The conversation on healthcare reform often gets reduced to a labeling match between Democrats and Republicans. When someone questions the feasibility or efficiency of certain healthcare reform proposals, Democrats might quickly label them as heartless, implying that they don't care about the welfare of the less fortunate. On the flip side, Republicans may accuse the same person of wanting to dismantle healthcare for the needy, suggesting they are undermining the very fabric of social safety nets. In the same vein, the contentious issue of gun control is another area where the labeling and blaming game is played with fervor. Criticizing gun control measures might lead Democrats to label you as NRA-funded, hinting at an insidious influence of gun lobbyists. Meanwhile, Republicans may accuse you of being anti-Second Amendment, suggesting you're infringing upon a fundamental constitutional right. These labels and accusations, while often oversimplified, reflect the deep-seated beliefs and ideological divides between the two parties. Democrats, often seen as champions of social justice, argue for healthcare reform and gun control as ways to protect and uplift the vulnerable. Republicans, on the other hand, uphold the values of personal freedom and limited government interference, viewing these issues through a different lens. However, it's important to remember that these labels often do more harm than good. They stifle productive conversation, prevent compromise, and deepen divisions. Rather than engaging in a constructive dialogue about the merits and drawbacks of various policies, the debate often devolves into a finger-pointing exercise. In the end, it's the American people who bear the brunt of this political standoff. The urgent need for healthcare reform and sensible gun control measures becomes lost in the crossfire of accusations and labels. The debate around these issues often becomes a war of words, with both sides resorting to labels and blame. Trade agreements and welfare programs, another two areas where labeling and blaming are rife. Let's begin with trade agreements. These are complex, multifaceted deals that impact every aspect of our economy. However, the political discourse often simplifies these agreements to black and white terms. For instance, if you express skepticism about a certain trade deal, Democrats might label you as protectionist, suggesting you're attempting to shield domestic industries from foreign competition at the expense of global economic growth. On the other hand, Republicans might accuse you of being anti-globalization, implying you're resisting the wider integration of economies, societies, and cultures that is often seen as a path to prosperity. Now, let's pivot to welfare programs. These initiatives are designed to support the most vulnerable members of society, yet they too become fodder for their labeling and blaming game. If you question the effectiveness of certain programs, you might find Democrats labeling you as uncaring or elitist, suggesting you lack empathy for the less fortunate. Conversely, Republicans might accuse you of promoting dependency on the government, implying that these programs discourage individual initiative and self-reliance. In both these areas, trade agreements and welfare programs, the discourse is often reduced to stereotypes and oversimplifications. It's a game of labels and blame, where nuanced discussion takes a back seat to catchy slogans and pointed accusations. Yet these are complex issues that require thoughtful deliberation and balanced policies. They deserve more than to be reduced to a binary choice between two extremes. This labeling and blaming game doesn't just polarize the conversation, it also obscures the real issues at stake. It prevents us from having a meaningful dialogue about how to balance the needs of our economy with the needs of our citizens, how to foster growth while ensuring that no one is left behind. These topics, too, are often reduced to a game of labels and blame. Finally, we turn to foreign aid and affirmative action. When it comes to foreign aid, Democrats and Republicans often find themselves at odds. Democrats may accuse Republicans of being isolationists, suggesting that they favor a policy of non-involvement in global affairs. They believe that foreign aid is a crucial tool for diplomacy, fostering goodwill and promoting human rights around the world. On the other hand, Republicans may label Democrats as unpatriotic or even as undermining national security. They argue that excessive foreign aid may drain resources that could be better used domestically, or that aid can sometimes prop up corrupt regimes, thereby indirectly harming the very people it's meant to help. Now let's pivot to affirmative action. This is a policy that is designed to redress past discrimination through active measures to ensure equal opportunity, particularly in employment and education. Democrats may accuse Republicans of being racist or discriminatory if they question the effectiveness or fairness of such policies. They argue that affirmative action is a necessary step towards equality and social justice. Republicans, however, may label Democrats as promoters of reverse discrimination or identity politics. They argue that affirmative action can sometimes lead to unqualified candidates being favored solely based on their minority status, thereby creating a new form of discrimination. As you can see, the labeling and blaming game plays out vividly in these policy debates. It's not just about the policies themselves, but also about how each party frames the other's position. This framing can shape public perception and, in turn, impact policy outcomes. It's a complex dance, with each party continuously trying to gain the upper hand. As we've seen, the labeling and blaming game is a common tactic in political discourse. It serves to highlight the differences between parties, but also sometimes obscures the nuances of these important policy debates. And as we move forward, it's crucial to look beyond the labels and understand the substance of the arguments being made. So, what have we learned about the labeling and blaming game in politics? We've journeyed through the battleground of political discourse, where the weapons of choice are labels and blame. From climate change to immigration, healthcare to gun control, trade agreements to welfare programs, foreign aid to affirmative action, and the vast expanse of foreign policy, we've seen how both sides use these tactics to shape the narrative. Democrats and Republicans alike have a penchant for painting their opponents with broad brushes, often resorting to labels that oversimplify complex issues. Whether it's accusations of being science deniers or anti-business, xenophobic or soft on security, heartless or dismantlers of healthcare, the rhetoric can be relentless. Yet, amid the noise of accusations and counter-accusations, it's crucial to remember that these are just tactics in a larger game. While labeling and blaming may be part of the political game, it's important for us as voters to look beyond the labels and blame to understand the real issues at hand.